Hello again, and welcome to the first video lesson in this unit supporting low English proficiency students in mixed level classes. In this lesson, I'll present the strategy, Create Community. Do you remember me? If not, I'm David Patent. As I mentioned in the introductory video, I've been teaching the English language for a long time, and one thing I've learned is that personally connecting to my students and getting them to connect to each other helps to build an inclusive classroom community. One way to connect to LEPs in your classroom is to tell them stories about your own difficulty learning a language or another skill. I like to tell students about how much difficulty I had learning my second language, Hungarian. It took me long enough just to master this one phrase, Jó napot kívánok, which is the polite way to say hello in Hungarian, so it's pretty important. I can't tell you how embarrassed I felt when I tried to use this phrase at first. Every time I used it in public, people gave me funny looks or acted like they couldn't understand me. It sounded great when I said it to myself, but as soon as I opened my mouth, it seemed to come out all wrong. You might be wondering why I'm telling you this story. Well, it's connected to the first strategy we'll discuss in this unit. Creating a sense of community, a safe environment in which all learners feel welcome and connected to you and their classmates, is critical to supporting your LEPs. I'm going to suggest two ways that you can create a sense of community in your classroom. When I told you about learning the word for hello in Hungarian, I was trying to gain your attention through storytelling. I told you a story about a challenge I had as a learner. Storytelling helps to break down the barrier between you and your students, especially LEPs. You are showing your students that it is okay to discuss challenges that you have had with your learning. The next step is to ask students to share stories with one another about challenges learning English, or anything that they might find difficult, like solving a math problem, playing a sport, or cooking a meal. Now students are telling stories to one another, helping to break down more barriers. Reducing the distance between you and your students can be scary. You might feel like you're giving up control of the class, which is kind of true. But think of it as sharing power with your students instead of giving up your power. Encouraging learners to open up to one another through telling stories about challenges can help create a learning community in which all students are welcome. The Sound of Silence is a famous song from the 1960s written by Paul Simon. In the song, Simon and his partner, Art Garfunkel, sing about people talking without speaking and hearing without listening. Simon noticed something important about human behavior. People often speak to each other without really communicating anything. Sometimes language teachers get nervous when their students are silent. They think that silence means lack of understanding, or worse yet, boredom. However, it is important to realize that students are learning even when you cannot observe them learning. In fact, going through a silent period when learning a language is normal. Think about it, we all started using our first language as listeners, not speakers. Part of creating community is allowing students to be silent until they are ready to speak. It's important to respect the fact that LEPs in our classes may not be ready to produce language, especially in beginner level classes. In fact, they might go through a long listening stage before they begin to communicate. Forcing them to communicate before they're ready might distance them from you and their classmates, excluding them from the classroom community. LEPs may become resentful and lose interest in learning English. When LEPs are ready to speak, they may do so slowly. They may need time to process a question you ask and time to translate what they want to say. Don't rush LEPs. Allow for silence between the time when you ask an LEP to perform in speech and their performance, even if the silence feels awkward. I've just mentioned a couple of examples of ways to create community in your English language classroom. But I bet that you can think of plenty of other ways, maybe even some you've used yourself. It's important to realize that not every teacher will create community in the same way. However, when students do not feel included in a classroom community, they are less likely to be successful learners, especially if they're LEPs. Now it's time to show what you've remembered about the strategy by completing the quiz for video lesson 1. Don't worry, you'll be able to review information from the video while you're taking the quiz. When you're done with the quiz, go on to video lesson 2.